So recently, me, Gigi, and a few friends went to Super Nintendo World in Orlando. The trip was so much fun, and we had a total blast. But while I was there, I couldn't help but feel like I could be 3D printing right now. But then I had an idea. What if I took the wonder of Super Nintendo World and brought it back home with me? Stick around to watch me take my old K1 and give it a power-up. So, a little background before I discuss all the upgrades that I added to my K1. This project started around a year ago when my Bamboo A1 printed upgrades video dropped. In that video, I had planned to make a whole series where I did a review of each machine and then did a printed upgrades video fixing the issues that I brought up in that review, so they'd all be like two-parters. The main issue with this structure is that I was mainly satisfied with my K1 stock, and none of the printed upgrades really did anything besides make the printer look nicer. I was always super jealous of the work the Bamboo community did on the X1 and P1 series to do their own themed builds. This particular build from Uncle Jesse was always my favorite, as I'm a huge Portal fan. Also, side note, this designer made a Minecraft brick block, which is actually the one that got me to work on a themed build. What I really wanted to do was a similar themed build, but nothing ever really stuck the way I wanted it to. That was when I got the idea to theme the printer to Super Mario. I started looking at game items, levels, and power-ups for ideas, and the more I thought about it, the more it worked in my head. With the base idea in mind, here are some ground rules that I set for myself. First, I couldn't make any permanent changes to the 3D printer. Since I'm doing all of this myself, if anything goes wrong or I don't like them, I want to be able to undo any damages or upgrades that I just don't like. Second, any upgrades had to leave the printer mobile. Most of my printers are easy to move, and my space is constantly in flux as I can never decide how I want everything to be oriented. This particular constraint will make much more sense when I discuss printer footing a little later in the video. The third and final rule was that all upgrades had to be themed in some way, well, to Mario. Even details as small as the covers for fans had to have a purpose for the design. I didn't want to just throw a bunch of upgrades on it that really didn't have any cohesion. That was my biggest complaint with my Bamboo A1 upgrades video that I did last year. Okay, alright. With all the rules out of the way, let's look at how I made my Super Mario Bros. Printer. Let's go! For the first upgrade, let's start with the most obvious, the new side and door panel details. These are the least printed of all the upgrades, and that's why I want to touch on it first. I went with standard vinyl sticker sheets, which I rolled on and cut to fit. This made it much easier to work with as I didn't have to remake the panels myself and print them. If you're inspired by my video and own something like a K1 SE, for instance, this upgrade might be better suited for you, as the panels are an actual upgrade over the stock machine. For the actual design, I tried to mimic a minimalist style, invoking Mario's overalls. Originally, I had planned to cover the back of the door in a red cellophane to give it a red tint, but still allowing you to view through the window. The reason I scrapped this is because the cellophane ended up shrinking when the printer was heating during its regular printing. So I had to peel it off and scrap that. Overall, I'm super happy with how clean this turned out, and it really helps highlight the screws and all of the corners, adding to that high quality feel of the build. Let's go! Now that I discussed the panels, it's best to discuss the door hardware accessories that I added. First, the door handle. The door handle is shaped like a coin from the Super Mario Bros. Series. I modeled this based off of files of the original door handle, taking measurements when I needed them. To get the detail on the coin, I used a mixture of chamfered and filleted edges so that it matched best with what the coin traditionally appears as in the game. Also, I do have an IRL reference. I printed this face up to make sure that the details printed correctly, which did mean that I had to heavily support it, but the trade-off is it looks so much cleaner. For filament, I printed the handle in both Inland Yellow PLA Plus and Inland Silk Gold PLA to see what worked best when put on the printer. I ended up choosing the gold as it felt more like an actual coin, and the yellow clashed a little bit with the buttons on Mario's overalls on the door. Let's go! The second door hardware upgrade is this door stopper, as I'm going to call it. The original K1 has this little air gap between the door and the touchscreen. Normally this isn't an issue when printing, but with more engineering grade filaments like ABS, the additional airflow will cause edges near the front right to warp slightly. So to mitigate this user on printables created a stopper that will help cut off the airflow when the door is closed. This model was printed in inland blue PLA to match best with the door panel, so that despite me not modifying it, it still keeps in line with Rule 3. Let's go! The third door hardware upgrade is a screen cover. Similar to what I said in my Bamboo A1 upgrades video, when the printer is asleep or turned off, the screen has a pretty noticeable mirror, making my footage tough to work with. Additionally, a cover will help protect the printer better, obviously. I modified the screen cover made by this user on Creality Cloud by filling in the text and detailing with my own logo. Pro tip, if you want to emboss a logo directly in your slicer, but don't want it to print in open space, make the difference between the two layers smaller than the precision in your slicer. In Orca Slicer and Bamboo Studio, this precision is listed right here. If the detail on the part itself is low enough, the slicer will recognize it as a separate face, allowing for paint bucket coloring, but it won't print those as different layers when you actually finish the build. This is how I achieve a lot of my embossed logos, texts, or otherwise for my other modeled prints. Fun fact, the text on the screen cover is actually written in the Super Mario Bros. Font. I use it in a lot of my older videos if you didn't know. To make the cover pop, I printed it in Prusament Blue and this red silk. Let's go! Alright, so now moving to the side panels, the next two upgrades have a very similar function. On the left side, I made this block textured bed holder. Over the years, I've bought and used several bed types while printing with my K1 and other various printers. The stock printer comes with this reversible smooth and textured PEI sheet. This was my go-to for a number of years and is what I recommend for most flexibles like TPU in my TPU Air video. You may notice that I have a duplicate of this plate, and that is because I got the second one as a clearance open box at Micro Center. I think you can tell why it might have been an open box. Ever since I upgraded my Bamboo A1 to a cold plate, I've totally been obsessed with them, and I wanted to try out Creality's own version. It works decently well, but it doesn't quite match the real deal. Speaking of which, the big bed upgrade I bought for this printer was the tried and true Big Tree Tech Cryo Grip Bed. This thing is seriously so good and my go-to on currently all of my active printers. As for the design of the holder, it's split into three parts. The main body was made by taking measurements from the side panel while it was off of the printer to gauge where the screws on each side would land. I needed 2 sets of blocks for a 2x2 pattern, which helped me get the overall measurements of the entire body of this print. Since all the blocks needed to be equal, I knew I would need an extra block for the screw portion. To make it easier to print, I left the singular block out and designed the rest to be standard brick blocks. I could have split the body in half to make it printable on my A1 or K1, but to improve strength so it doesn't print in 2 parts and has to be glued together, I used my SV08 to print this part all in one shot. Because it was printed vertical, I decided to print the brick pattern separately to improve the looks, but in hindsight, I probably could have gotten away with printing it all in one piece. The question mark block is my favorite part of this mod, bar none. Since this block covers the screws, it needed to be removable, so I included a section for these really tiny magnets. That means it can be snapped on and off really easily to hide the screws on the bottom of the panel. I'm so happy with how this turned out. To get the embossed design, I added all the details as a modifier in my slicer and printed it using my AMS. This used the same technique that I used for the screen cover. For the brick portions, I used inland brown PLA, and the question mark block was made using inland yellow PLA+, inland brown PLA, and overture white PLA. Let's go! As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I had planned to make a K1 upgrades video about a year ago, and one of the upgrades I did end up installing, but never made a video on, was these side mounts for the top cover. They actually ended up being the most useful upgrade I've ever made, as when I'm loading and unloading filament, I often have to take the top cover off. I wanted to keep the functionality of this previous upgrade, but keeping in line with Rule 3, I needed to make it somehow inspired by Mario. So that's how I got the idea to make these. They were inspired by the box's new nozzles for flood come in Super Mario Sunshine. They were super easy to model, as the boxes in-game are more geometric, and so I could keep those chamfered edges. I printed them in 2 pieces so I could get the multicolor printing without all of the support waste. Additionally, by printing in 2 pieces, it was so much easier to install these onto the printer, because the original ones would require a small screwdriver to kind of wrench on the screws with the cover on. You can kind of see how it's awkward even to describe it. To actually model, I grabbed a PNG version of the texture from the original box and added it as a modifier in the slicer, similar to the question mark block and the screen cover. For the red box, I used inland red PLA Plus and Hobby Lobby white PLA. For the blue box, I used Hobby Lobby blue and white PLA. Let's go! As shown in the rest of this video, you no doubt have noticed the additions that I made to the printer's feet, but they go a little bit deeper than you might first think. One big downside of the K1's rubber feet is that they are only friction fit onto the printer. This means that often when lifting or moving the printer, they'll fall off. To fix this issue, this user on Printables designed a drop-in replacement for the foot attachment piece that includes this locking screw for the printer feet. This mod was added specifically to address Rule 2, but being unseen, I was worried it would break Rule 3. To fix this issue, I modeled these foot covers, which admittedly are purely aesthetic. The way I achieved this was by measuring the size of the rubber feet and making that size a hole to a slightly larger version of the same model. I did make sure to cut a little bit extra off the bottoms of the covers to make sure that the actual rubber foot carried all of the load of the printer, and so the PLA would never crack or possibly interfere with how the printer printed. Speaking of which, the new mount was printed in inland black PLA+, and the covers were printed in inland brown and sand PLA. Let's go! Okay, with the sides and front covered, let's move to the back of the printer. Now, there was only one upgrade that I decided to add to the back. One thing that the K1C and K2 added to the K1 was a carbon filter on the back fan. When looking for solutions for the K1, I stumbled onto this external carbon filter and got a bright idea. What if I made the filter, but made it look like a Mario pipe? The way I achieved this was by measuring the stock body in Tinkercad and using those measurements to create just a new lid. The result is a brilliantly designed replaceable carbon filter that fits with the Mario theme perfectly. One thing to note is that technically this mod breaks Rule 1, as the mounting magnets needed to be glued in place. 2 ways that I hand wave breaking of this rule is 1, the magnet mounts are hot glued in place, meaning that with some effort I could wrench them out later. And 2, the hexagons filled are not really massive changes that would break the printer if I decide to ditch this upgrade down the line. Aside from that, I love this upgrade. The magnetic mounts work perfectly, and throughout all my testing and movement of the printer, the filter never fell off. Knock on wood. Now I feel like I can print engineering filaments such as ABS with a little bit more of peace of mind that those harmful VOCs coming from the printer are being captured and not circulating around my workshop. To make the filter, I used Overture Green PLA and Inland Black PLA+. Let's go! Speaking of fans, let's move inside the printer to discuss the 2 fan covers that I added. The rear fan cover is very simple. This is meant to block any wisps of plastic from clogging up the carbon filter that I had just added, but mainly serves as an aesthetic upgrade because this is the fan that is most seen in time lapses. I modeled this one by hand with measurements taken from the fan itself and the back of the printer body. To get the Super Mario logo, I used a model from this user on printables. I resized the model in my slicer and did a filament swap at layer, printing only in black and white. This is because my current multicolor printing is limited to only 4 colors, and this model requires 5. With that white colored text, I painted on the letters by hand and glued the logo on afterwards. This fan cover was printed in Inland Black PLA Plus and Hobby Lobby White PLA. Let's go! The second was on the large side fan. Since the fan is much closer to the heated bed, I decided to print this mod in ABS, that being Inland White ABS specifically. Originally, I had the idea to make this fan look like the carpet in the foyer of Peach's Castle from Mario 64, but I really couldn't find all the colors I needed in ABS. Also, I didn't have a printer capable of printing multicolor ABS at the time anyway, so I just completely ditched that idea. This was in favor of keeping the vanilla fan mod that I found by this user on printables. To make it more Mario themed, again keeping in line with Rule 3, I styled it to look like a Yoshi egg. At the time, I didn't realize it, but this mod fits even better with the next mod I want to discuss, given that the Mario movie is just coming out. Wink wink. Let's go! Keeping with the Mario Galaxy theme, that brings us to the next mod. I went back and forth several times on what to do for a hotend mod. Originally, I had the idea to do something similar to my A1 with the PTFE tube guide that was gold on that printer. Instead, I thought it might be cute to add a Mario cap to the top of the printer. With this idea, the cover could be printed in a skin tone and a mustache painted on afterwards. I liked how this paired with the enclosure panels because then it would be the Mario head with the Mario body on the outside, but there was one problem. The K1 uses sensorless homing, so something added to the top of the tool head might mess with calibration. In addition, I felt I had represented every mainline 3D Mario game except for Galaxy. That was when I got a brain blast. What if I printed a pure black cover and painted it to look like outer space? Adding on to that idea, what if I printed a tiny Luma and glued it onto the fan? This might be my favorite upgrade just for how cute it is and how many little details I was able to add to it. The galaxy is filled with star bits, planets, and even some comets. Feel free to pause the video and look for all the details I added. The little Luma also holds some neat details in relation to the games. In the Galaxy games, Mario is paired with a very specifically colored Luma that allows him to spin attack. I match that color, and when the printer runs, he spins like in the game. I guess we can just imagine now that my printer is literally running on star power. And by star power, I mean Luma star power. This shroud was printed in XYZ Printing Black ABS and designed by this user on printables. Looking at the mechanical advantages of this new shroud, it significantly reduces the weight of the toolhead compared to stock. This reduced weight should in theory reduce the ringing and ghosting I see on a lot of my K1 prints. But that's not all that I added to the toolhead on my K1. Let's go! Alright, so this is one of the other big hardware upgrades that I did to the K1. The stock K1 does not come with a unicorn nozzle. That is something that the K1 Max and all later revisions of the K1 and the K2 and therefore added. If I ever want to add the CFS upgrade to my K1, it needs to use a unicorn nozzle as that's what the CFS infrastructure uses. So to upgrade my K1 on a hardware level, I decided to install this new upgraded unicorn nozzle housing. The advantages of this nozzle is that the larger heat chamber allows for much faster printing, but that's not all. Back at 3D Printopia, I pitched this video idea to my friends at E3D and they loved it. To support the video and me, they sent over 2 of their new Obsidian nozzles. I've always said that I compromise printing speed for printing quality, but with this new nozzle, I don't really need to do that. Their website boasts more than 65% faster printing speeds over the stock hotend, and I wanted to put that to the test. So, I ran some tests following my calibration video, links in the iCard, and here's what I found. Linear flow and temperature needed a little bit of a slight raise, which made sense since I was pushing material a lot faster, so I needed to supply that material faster as well. These were rather small. The big change was in volumetric flow. My max volumetric flow passed not one, not two, but nearly 3 separate speed tests. My final max volumetric flow rate was over 200% higher than my stock setup. Now, it's important to note that this increase is a bit inflated as I was comparing with the stock K1 nozzle. I believe it's the Sprite extruder nozzle, not the upgraded Unicorn nozzle. Additionally, this max flow rate will rarely be achieved as the printer will need time and space to accelerate to these speeds and then decelerate back to slow down. Despite these caveats, I am blown away by the performance of this hotend, and I'm not even done. The other big advantage of this nozzle is abrasion resistance. I've not gotten the chance to print with many fiber-filled materials because they often clog my nozzles. Later this year, I'll be updating this video with my experiences with fiber-filled materials. As for now, I have purchased a few and plan to test them in the coming months, so stay tuned to see how they all operate. Before I move on, special thanks to E3D for the nozzles. They look perfect on this new Galaxy-themed design. Oh! And before I completely move away from calibration stuff, the new lighter hotend actually lets me get away with a more narrow range of speed. To show off a bit of what this new toolhead can do, here is a side-by-side comparison between a print from my Bamboo A1 and Creality K1 with the new nozzle. Try to guess what machine made each print and leave your guesses in the comments below. In the coming weeks, these will be shorts and TikToks, giving away the answer as to what printer they were printed on. Feel free to either come back to this video and tell me whether you got it right, or leave a comment on those shorts and TikToks and let me know if you guessed it right. Hey, this is Editing Ace here. I'm putting the finishing touches on the video now, and I just wanted to add a quick section about TPU. So as I was editing, I was running off a print in TPU, and this is a speed test for max volumetric flow, as you know from the video. And the top is 20 millimeters cubed per second, and the bottom is 3 millimeters cubed per second. So you can see my initial was 3.2, so almost this baseline right here. And I was able to get about halfway up here, which would about double my printing speed. It ended up being, I think, 8.1 or something like that. So I was able to print TPU quite a bit faster, but I will follow up with this in a future video, so stay tuned for more TPU shenanigans on this new K1. I'm so excited. Let's go! Well, now that we've discussed the outside panels, the feet, and the inside of the printer, we've made it to the final printed mod I added to my K1. And there's a very particular reason why I saved this one for last. This is my lid riser, inspired by Peach's Castle from Mario 64, Mario Odyssey, and many, many other Mario games. I've wanted to add a riser to the lid of my printer for a while now because the printer's cable chain will often rub on the top metal, making noise and messing up the frame. I went back and forth on what design to use. Originally, I had plans to use some sort of block design and have little star-shaped grills like with this nuclear symbol riser. The issue I had with this was that it just kind of felt over-designed, and also, it really wasn't that aesthetically pleasing. After all, this is the top mount. It's going to be one of the most visual pieces of the printer. When looking at assets and levels from the games, I had a light bulb moment when I realized the riser designed by this user on printables might work. It's a simple print, which is really great because it made it easy to remix. Originally, I printed the files in ABS with plans to add these marble textured bricks onto the sides later. What I thought was that this would mimic the texture scene in specifically Super Mario 64, where the brick is kind of broken at the edges and the tops with a white border. For the spire, I printed these red pyramids and planned to glue them onto the top front and leave the back spires blank, so I could still remove the top cover when I was installing filament. Once I installed the pieces, I ran into a little problem. The riser wasn't tall enough to let the spires rest on top. I really liked this idea, and I didn't want to scrap it, so I ended up remodeling the entire riser from scratch. I took measurements from the machine itself, making sure to leave that extra space that I needed for the top risers. To get the brick pattern, I used a technique present in many of my builds. Let me detail that a little bit better. First, I sketch out the brick pattern as I want it to appear, usually by taking a series of rectangles and cutting them in half. Once the pattern is set, I extrude all non-adjacent bricks to a set amount, in this case 0.5 millimeters. Once they are extruded, I chamfer all the edges the same exact amount. In this case, that would be 0.5 millimeters. Now I unhide the original sketch and repeat this process until all the bricks are completed. I will admit it's a bit time consuming, but I'm unaware of a better way to accomplish this look, and I mean, what can I say? The results are well worth the effort. Another thing to note is these combination bricks that bridge the gap between two faces. To achieve this effect, I created a sketch on the top of the riser and drew a line between both cuts. The trigonometry isn't advanced, just remember that all angles sum to 180 if drawn on a straight line. After the sketch was drawn, I extruded out the same amount as before but toggled the option Direction and told it to follow the line that I had just created. After this, I chamfered each edge like before, and you get this combination brick scene in the final model. For the red spire, I created a pyramid with the dimensions of the riser's top face and cut out a portion by lofting the cutout portion to a point on one of the legs of the pyramid. This lets me remove the top riser a lot easier, but also allows for the entire part to print without supports. Instead of gluing the spires, I chose to magnetize each like the question marks from before. After printing, I'm blown away by how well they turned out. It is important to note that these were all printed in inland marble PLA. I'm aware that they could warp over time, but I did this for two reasons. One, I didn't have any marble ABS on hand and could only find marble PETG online. And two, if the pieces warp, I can always print a cheap replacement. The spires work really well, but since they only stabilize on one point, they'll often spin around when transporting the printer. What I would do if I ever reprint this riser is add more magnets to give it better anchorage. The spires were both printed in inland PLA+. On the back, I had to make some slight adjustments to the printed frame to account for the excess distance the PTFE tube had to make above the riser. Some final details I added are these window stickers, and the best part is this peach window like from the game. Alright, well, this certainly was a blast for me, and I hope it was for you too. I have a soft spot for personalization of tech, and like I mentioned, I've always wanted to do my own themed build. This is more of a personal opinion, but I've kind of always felt that the Creality maker community views their printers more as tools and less as parts of their space. Now, this is directly compared with the bamboo community at the very least. What I'm kind of hoping is that this video could mark a shift in that idea. I'm proud of my space and of my machines, as I make more of them mine. Oh, and hey, Creality, if you're watching, feel free to hit me up if you'd like me to do any more custom builds with your machines, haha. As for some more general feelings, I hope this video does well, as I'm planning on doing some even bigger modifications to some of my other printers in the future. If you know, you know. Thank you so much to E3D for supplying the obsidian nozzles, as they were a game changer. Please go and show them some love. As for me, and where the next video will take me, I think it's about time we take my multicolor and multi-material printing to the next level. What do you say? Well, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And, bye-bye!